So, welcome to Mental Health Matters as we discuss coping with change. Tonight, we're going to talk with Raleigh Kincaid. Along with serving as Central's minister to worship, Raleigh is a licensed marriage and family therapist and is employed by Family Practice Associates of Lexington. He's worked there for 15 years. He sees adults and children over 12. He works with individuals, couples, families, and other groups. And he's also led a variety of seminars and other educational events in Central Kentucky on topics like managing stress, group formation and dynamics, communication, and aging. He's also worked previously as an adjunct professor at BCTCS. This is a lot of stuff, Raleigh, and EKU in the departments of Human Environmental Sciences and Women's Studies. So welcome, Raleigh. What else, after all that, do we need to know about you? Anything else you want to tell us?
I think that and the fact that my head fills up the entire screen is probably about all you need to know.
Well, I'm grateful that you've come to talk with us tonight, and helped us kind of get all this going with suggestions about other folks we can involve too. So thanks for all your work on this, and I'm excited to hear about this tonight so that I can cope with change better. I'm really glad you chose this topic because it's one of those things that I know is there, but I don't really realize it's kind of under the surface. And then when you said it, I thought, oh yeah, I have a big problem with that. I know logically that the change is always happening all around me, but I don't like it when it happens usually. And so can you talk to us a little bit about why is it so hard for us?
Well, and I think, the truth is some people lay claim to the fact that they're comfortable with change, they like change, and maybe there are those people who are better at it than other people. But I think as a general rule for human beings, I mean, we have a tendency to sort of write scripts, of the way life is supposed to be. This is what's supposed to happen, the way the week's supposed to go, the way the career is supposed to go, the way the relationship is supposed to go. And we really take a lot of comfort in those scripts and kind of knowing SCRIPTS scripts as in a play, as in a script. Take a lot of comfort in kind of being able to predict. And I think we really get discombobulated pretty quickly when things go off script, when they become unpredictable. And I think that's just true for us in general. I mean, it's true for us as individuals. It's true for us as families. There's this whole systems idea of what's called homeostasis, which is essentially that systems tend to maintain their current balance. And when one person tries to change that balance or do something different, there's pressure to go back to the old way, even if everybody agrees that the change would be a good change. There's just like a human resistance to that, even when it's the right thing to do. And it often brings anxiety. It brings just fear, stress, lots of stuff that come with that, with how we experience change, even positive change.
That's interesting. It's really interesting to me when you often bring up, as we're talking about other things like family systems and how those systems work. And I tend to think about it as a me issue rather than a we issue with change too. That's really.
Well, I mean, just look at the changes we've been asked to make per COVID-19 and how much state, local, national, international, global resistance there were to those changes. Things that are, this is not that big of a deal. But the resistance to it has been overwhelmingly powerful, So, yeah, I mean, there is a tendency to say we want the world to be as it is. We want the rules to be as they are. We know the way the game is played here. We know how we fit in here. We know how that we're going to be able to, sort of how it goes. And there's a lot of resistance to change. I have a friend, Susan, you know who this friend is that I was talking about when I said a friend who says when one crowd tries to crawl out of the barrel, the other crowd's dragging back in. Right. And that's the tendency, I believe.
Yeah. So when we're dealing with change, I mean, it's nice to hear that it's normal to feel this way about change. How do we kind of suss out when we get to a place where that change is unhealthy, or our resistance to that change is unhealthy, or that we've got kind of unskillful coping mechanisms that are taking place?
Yeah, well, an unhealth is a hard thing to sort of. I'm gonna have to broaden the term to what that means. In this regard, I think unhealthy coping resistance to change is any resistance to change that is inevitable. That is, if something is going to be resisting, it's sort of like they said in the Borg, resistance is futile. So why are you putting energy into something that you can't change? Why are you wasting energy into something that is inevitable? So in that regard, obviously some change needs to be resisted, and we have a right to fight it, and sometimes we're able to keep that from happening. But other times, like with COVID-19, things like that. And the way that you know that it's unhealthy is when you start to demonstrate, maybe unhealthy behaviors in yourself, unhealthy coping responses, like the tendency to isolate a lot of people. And of course, COVID-19 was real fertile for that. Give us a lot of opportunity to isolate ourselves. Patterns in our health, patterns in our self-care, eating. Obviously, a lot of people gained a lot of weight during COVID-19. Guilty as charged. Some people maladaptively stop exercising as much as they need to. They drink more than they should. All these things, and that's kind of some of the signs to say, I'm not responding to this change in a healthy way, in a positive way, in a way that's going to help me adapt to the new reality.
Oh man.
Yeah, sorry.
The acceptance of the way things are. I see more and more my resistance to that. Like, this has happened, but it shouldn't have happened. Or how do I change or make this better or fix what's happened? And sometimes you can't. Like, what do you?
Since it should not have happened, I'm going to resist that it has happened. I'm not going to accept it because it shouldn't have happened, but it has happened, right? And there's another person on the call here tonight who is Kim Kincaid, and she will tell you that I am one of the worst when it comes to accepting change. I don't change easily. One of my mentors is a former member of Central, Lloyd Johnson. Lloyd sent me a paragraph not too long ago, and the title of the paragraph was "Let It Go." And the first line of the paragraph was, "Let go of the way life was supposed to be and embrace how it is." And that was like kicking me in the gut, because he realized that is not my strong suit. I want, like you all want, life to be the way it's supposed to be. And there is very little about the last 2.5 years of the way it was supposed to be. And yet it is as it is, right?
That's a thing that's interesting, as I think about this theologically too. We're kind of called, at least I feel, we hope to see a vision of a better world, a more compassionate world, a more loving world. And so so as a minister, Raleigh, as you there, and as a therapist, I'm curious about how do you balance those things? How does the acceptance and then the moving forward, how does that work?
Well, I don't think as a Christian that we are called to accept the lack of justice or inequality or all the things that we stand against, etc. I think that we should say, well, that's just the way it is. I don't think that's what I'm talking about. I think there are those things where the battle cry is clear, and we are called to stand against injustice and inequality and racism, sexism, and all those isms that we. So I'm not saying we have to accept the fact that they're real, and we also, maybe the hardest part is we have to accept the fact that they're all in us to some degree or other. Accepting the fact that I have to identify the racist that is in me, the homophobe that is in me, the sexist that is in me. And not accept that as inevitable either, but to really work hard to change that as well. So I don't think that's the kind of change we have to sort of sit back and say, well, I'm just going to have to adapt to this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's this kind of, it's both and of acceptance of the way things are, and yet the continual moving forward.
Oh, what was it that Ted Kennedy said at Bobby Kennedy's funeral? Some people see things as they are and say why, and others see things as they could be and say why not. I think we are called to that, to the why. But when it comes to something like chronic disease or the pandemic or life and death, we have to adapt.
Yeah.
Adapting is really hard. And unadapting, and I know we'll get to that in a second, but adapting back may be just as hard as adapting in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are some of the things that we do that we can do to cope with change when it comes our way? Are there, skills, behaviors, practices?
It is identifying those maladaptive things and being, God grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Is to put your effort into things that you can actually do something about. You do have to try to be more health conscious. You have to be aware that you can't isolate yourself. You need to reach out and have somebody that you can be vulnerable with. I think vulnerability is really difficult when you're scared. And yet when you're scared is probably the time when you most need that place in your life where you can be really vulnerable and say, let me tell you what it's like to be me right now, and not be ashamed of that. Rest and routine. Mental health, two basic tenets of larger mental health is get adequate rest and have somewhat of a measure of routine in your life. And that is not that you do the same thing every day, but there is some sense of predictability, some sense of forward motion to your day. And so getting enough sleep is really important. Not getting too much sleep is important. Knowing where that sweet spot is for you and really seeking it out, very important. Physical activity, all those things as well. And seeking your community. I mean, God bless Central Baptist Church, and that we have a place where we can go and feel safe about being who we are and know that we're going to be loved and accepted. That is a mighty adaptive thing to have a community like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's one of the things that Central has taught me more and more, that, it is okay to be you. It's okay to be yourself. And that feels like, I don't know, that's a lot of the acceptance that you're talking about.
It's and the sad truth of that okay to be you part is sometimes we're the last ones to accept that it's okay to be me. It's hard. This gets sort of off change a little bit, but it's really hard to accept somebody telling me that I'm lovable and I'm worthy and I'm of value, and I don't really believe it myself. It's nice to hear, but unless I really believe that on some deep and fundamental level, it won't fill up the bucket, because there's a hole in it.
Yeah. Well, and then we have the importance of the system again too. That we're in a community that is reinforcing these loving, kind, and generous behaviors. I'm interested too about, we hear a lot about mindfulness. Do you have any mindfulness practices or anything like that you encourage people to do?
Well, I believe very strongly. I'm not, Kim will tell you again, I'm not great at doing it, practicing it, but I'm very much a believer in mindfulness and mindfulness practices, that our power lies in the present, right? And
that is all true.
Thank you, Kim. That was recorded. You know that, don't you? So, so the depressed people are living like shoulda, woulda, coulda, and anxious people are living what if. But where power lies, where you expend your energy is in the present. So I have one of those little signs on my shoulder. I think that one right there says NOW period HERE period THIS period. Now, here, this. And that is my present mindfulness mantra, which is to remind me that where I need to live my life, where my power, where I'm able to do something is now, this time, here, this place, this thing that I'm doing. Now, here, this. And I got that from a really beautiful interview by Krista Tippett on being of Father Gregory Doyle or Boyle, but he's a Catholic priest out in California. And it was a wonderful interview. And he mentioned that in his interview. And I thought, yeah, that's important. Now, hear this. And if we can do that, I believe we can adapt to change, because we're not actively present in the change in as much as we're here now. We're not how it was, how it's going to be, but we're just here now. And that makes adapting to change much more functional, I think.
Mm. Yeah, man, that's hard to do.
That's why I'm still employed. I mean, trying to convince people of that. It's an easy sell. It's a hard practice.
Yeah. I so often find myself either just behind or just ahead. I'm doing something, but I'm really thinking about the next thing, or I've got to get this done down here. So that's why I'm doing this now. So, yeah.
Well, you have to plan. This is not, don't plan. This is flying by the seat of your pants. But at whatever point the planning is as complete as it can be, then the attention has to come back to this present moment in time, so we can live as powerfully as we're capable of living, which is doing the thing that we're doing as excellently as we can do it. You string a bunch of those together, you've lived a pretty adaptive life.
Mm. I haven't thought about that in the context of being adaptive, and that's interesting. That just your is it your attention? Is that what it is? Your attention is being attentive is adaptive.
It's a big part of it, but it's also being self-aware, being attentive in the moment to what is and is not working, what is and is not feeling functional, learning from the moment, not being shamed by the mistakes, but learning from the mistakes, doing better, improvement that way. Then that's where adaptability comes in. Of course, every situation has its own adaptive responses, and not every adaptive response works in all situations. That's where I struggle with things with the veterans that I work with, and they had to adapt literally under fire how to operate in a war zone. And what's adaptive in Baghdad 15 years ago, and what's adaptive in a Walmart in 2022, even though to those people feel essentially the same, but there's a different adaptive behavior that's appropriate to the situation, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to sort through the feelings and come up with what is adaptive to here now. This. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Those feelings feel like reality.
Mm-hmm.
At least they feel like my reality whenever I'm feeling this way, which I guess may not be what's really going on.
And it takes a lot of mindfulness to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, but this is what I know. And classically in psychology, that's differentiation, the ability to distinguish between thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And when the feelings start to overwhelm you and start to come up with the wrong logic, that's when we sometimes get into trouble. But if we're able to step back and say, I'm feeling very scared and I'm feeling threatened here, but what I know is that this is a Walmart, and probably it's a fairly safe place to be.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be that anxious about it. It's a hard sell.
Yeah. Hard to pull off the rewriting that narrative. That story runs awful deep a lot of times.
Well, it's going to be us too coming then out of the pandemic, and how we are going to have to adapt to the next phase of the reality, which may be back to some sense of normalcy, right? And something that we learned through histories of studying people is that the adaptations that take place under high stress are hard to unlearn. Yeah. And what we've had to do in the last 2 years is high stress adaptability, literal life and death. Maybe not like that building in Baghdad, but somewhere in that general map, right?
Yeah.
And so learning how to adapt to that is going to be hard to unlearn because of the stress that we were under when we learned it. So I think in some ways, growing back out of this and going back into whatever the next phase looks like is better, but is also going to be maybe harder than we expect.
I'm already feeling it. Like, as we talk about, opening up, doing more things, more activity, I feel anxious about it. And it's hard to pin down because I'm not as anxious as I was in crowds, depending on the crowd. At church, I know that most
At
people.
Walmart, to get you every time.
Oh my goodness, I was already nervous at Walmart before all this started. But but I do. It's not even as much as that. It's a strange feeling that's kind of hard to pin down. That I do have this sense of unease about like what's going to change. What am I going to have to do differently? I kind of know how pandemic works now. What does it look like now post-pandemic? And yeah.
Right. And that's, of course, complicated by the whole course of the pandemic has been a series of best guesses, right? Our best guess is that this should be safe. And so we're still going to be in a season of best guess. Our best guess is that you can go into public places now without your mask if you've been vaccinated, So there's also that uncertainty too.
Yeah. So, like, are there, whenever we think about moving back in that, what do you have like suggestions, ideas, thoughts for people as we start to move back about things to think about and consider to kind of help us cope with this change as we do that?
Well, I think offering grace to ourselves, accept the fact that we may be slow to learn, give grace to other people who are even struggling with it more than we are. I mean, not everybody adapted at the same pace. Not everybody adapted to the same degree. So we have to allow that change is going to be different with different people as well, and be kind to ourselves and be kind to others. And well, why are you still doing that? Don't you know the CDC said no? Let people figure that out and let them lovingly sort of come to their own peace with that. I think is really important. So I think that's where the power of the community is going to be really helpful, as well as to helping us all sort of, hold one another's hand through another phase of change and adaptation.
Yeah, and let people be, and
and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, the shaming occurs accidentally sometimes. Sometimes the look that somebody would give me when I'm in the store and I'm still wearing my mask, that look of what is wrong with you? I don't know if that's what they're thinking or not, but that's what I hear.
Yeah. At our meeting the other night, we were the only ones, and we were the only ones with masks, but nobody said. Everybody was very kind and nice, but I felt like the odd one out, obviously. And, and you wonder about the judgments or what they assume about, who you are. And assumptions were probably right.
I suspect that amongst the people I don't know everybody on this group very well, but I know a lot of you really well. Aaron will be the last one to take off his mask. I can tell you right now, he will wear his mask. He may even get one of those that's painted like his face so it doesn't show up too much, but he may be the only person on here who changes less easily than me. Yeah.
I was going to get a Darth Vader mask at one point, just cover it all. And, with an air compressor and all that stuff. But, we do. So, well, anything else before we kind of turn over for Q&A, Raleigh, that you want to share about coping with change while you still have the floor?
No, I think that this is what I do all day long, so I can wax on for hours and hours and hours. I don't want to do that. I just hope that we can all just kind of be calm and kind to ourselves and kind to one another. Don't be too torn up if things don't come as easy as you think that they should. Don't be surprised if something sort of catches you off guard that you would have never thought would have caught you off guard. Why is this bothering me? Well, because it is, and that's okay. And if you don't take it too hard, then you'll get to it a little bit more easily, I think. And rely on your siblings, your Christian brothers and sisters, and rely on your faith. And so far, so good. I mean, I think Central's done a great job of helping one another get through this, and I think we will continue to do the same. It gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I've heard about so many ministers with burnout and so many problems, and I think about how this community of faith has been sustenance to me in the midst of this time. And so,
Yeah, me too.
yeah, grateful for that. Well, thank you so much, Raleigh. Now we're going to take some time for some questions. And give me 1 second, and I will stop the recording here. And